Welcome to The Most Important Thing. I'm Danielle DeMarco Neufeld,
And I'm Greg Neufeld.
and together we're exploring how ambitious, busy families can build culture at home.
Because after all, family is the most important thing.
Hi, Goosey.
Hey, my love.
Today we are diving into a foundational topic in family culture, which is family values.
Yeah, the wills and trusts of family culture.
This one, honestly, I needed a reason or angle to motivate me to discuss this topic because I feel like a lot of times you can talk about values and then they can just sit on the wall. And I really wanted to have a conversation about why values are important. And so I rumbled a bit with my thinking on this. And honestly, where I'm coming out is that I got here thinking about my career, specifically what happened when I wasn't in a space where I had values to fall back upon. And during that time, I learned firsthand how not having values can leave you both unmotivated and, quite frankly, lost when times get tough. And so I want to proactively defend against that within our family.
I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about, but do you want to say more there?
Sure, happy to. So it was right after Hunter was born, right? So about 7 years ago, I quit what I thought was going to be my dream job, the job that I had been working towards for the better part of a decade. Because ultimately, the organization lacked a vision and values. And at the outset, I didn't ask enough about that from the leadership. And what I realized is that I had, in my first job at a hedge fund called Citadel, I was in such an intentional, strong culture that I didn't know what I didn't know, and I took it for granted. But it wasn't until I was out of that space and in a different company that I realized how values aren't just virtue signaling fluff. They are the backbone of an organization or a family, right? They are a decision-making tool in good times and both a life raft and a lighthouse in difficult times.
And when you don't have any of that, how do you anchor?
Right. Understanding how to prioritize and how to motivate myself in an environment where I'm already feeling unmoored. Values really are this safe haven to support doing the next right thing.
And that's you as a grown woman with a fully developed amygdala and all of your wits about you. So you can imagine how important this is to a family's foundation where you have young children that are developmentally vulnerable
Mm-hmm.
to lots of outside forces. Creating values and instilling family culture feels like the most important thing to be doing. But
Mm-hmm.
how do you do it?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I think step one is to set those values, but the most important thing about family values is to communicate them.
Right.
I think that it really does come down to fostering this sense of safety and belonging within a family. But the values do have to be applied and embodied, which we will get to. There was a 2019 Forbes article that has always stuck with me that defined success as the state of living and working according to our values, and failure as the state of living and working not according to our values, which I thought was always a very simple yet meaningful perspective.
Yes.
The other thing I wanted to mention is that I think that the creating of values is a deeply personal exploration and something that will look different to each family. So I've linked two of my favorite values exercises in the show notes, one from Brene Brown and one from Claire Hughes Johnson, two people that I really admire. But at the end of the day, there are lots of great approaches out there, and this is an experimental, safe to fail space. So there's really no wrong way to get started. But you and I, we do already have a set of values, right?
We do.
So we have a family cheer that feels right. It's a mnemonic for the name Neufeld.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not perfect and it's definitely missing some things, but our kids know it by heart. So it feels like as good a place to start as any.
It's very well communicated.
Yeah. But how do we make it truly actionable? Because once you name your values, the real magic is in how you communicate them, especially to your kids. Research shows that the way that we share values matters just as much as the values themselves.
Duh.
Exactly. So, what's the most important thing about family values? Make sure your values are real. And that is a mnemonic for repeated, embodied, applied, and literal. So, let's break those down and talk about how to bring them to life at home.
So R is for repeated.
Yeah. So, values need to be reinforced regularly, and we can proactively create tools for them to be thought about or discussed. So, some ideas that I have heard are gotcha jars when we spot someone doing something that is the value that we hold, whether it's kindness or integrity, etc., or to speak about a value regularly at bedtime check ins, maybe do a rose thorn bud on a specific value, or at family meetings.
Great. And we've gotten our kids to repeat our values through a family cheer. So making it easy to remember is probably a big part of this too, especially for little ones.
Yes. Shall we say our family cheer
Yes,
just so that
please.
folks know?
Yes, please.
Okay. It's a little embarrassing, guys. Here we go.
Yeah, here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Who are we? Hunter,
Jade,
Jade, Maverick, Danielle, Greg, Winston, Neufeld.
And
And what does that mean? We are noble, explorers, unbothered, fun-loving, empathetic, luminous, and determined.
Go
Woo!
Neufelds.
Go Neufeld. And there are hand signals as well, which
There
I'm
sure
doing
are.
them. It's fun. We tend to do it at the beginning of car rides. Now the kids have asked to do it every morning before they leave for school.
Mm-hmm.
There's usually one person, one child that leads us in the cheer that's most excited about saying it. But by the end, everybody's engaged. Okay. So, repeated. Values need to be reinforced regularly. Next, embodied. Values must be modeled by adults consistently. Obviously, we all know the importance of modeling, but it really helps to name it too. And when I think about this, I think about how there have been quite a few missed opportunities for me to tie some of our experiences back to a specific family value, just to really, as we talk about bridging that gap between these abstract terms in our cheer and the way that we are operating in our day-to-day life. So not too long ago, the 3 kids and I were at TJ Maxx, and Maverick broke a snow globe in the middle of the floor. And the kids were like, "Oh, let's just leave. It's okay." And I'm like, "No, we have to do the next right thing." And so I went up to the sales associate, and even though I really didn't want to, explain to them what had happened. And the real missed opportunity there was just to say, I showed nobility today by being honest with the sales associate about the mess we made, even though it was inconvenient for us as a family.
Yep. Today, I was a noble Neufeld.
Mm-hmm. That one rolls off the tongue. So repeated and embodied. Next, applied. Values should guide decisions, not just sit on a wall, and focus on open-ended conversations, not commandments. So things like when Maverick and Jade are arguing, saying, your sister's having a hard time. What might empathy look like in this moment? Or when we have opportunities, how can we extend our family's acts of service orientation to our friends who are suffering a loss? Just starting the dialogue grounded in a value can be a great launch pad for making these ideas come to life.
So help me understand how applying the values together versus modeling them and embodying them is like, how should I think about those two things? Because I want to always fight the resistance, as I say, in life and do the next right thing. And I feel like that is embodying them, but also applying them. Is that looking proactively for opportunity to exert those values as opposed to just doing the next right thing, which is more on the embodied side?
Sure. I think using it as a decision-making tool. So what you're talking about as far as embodying them and, quote, fighting the resistance, as you say, I think is when you already have made a decision about what the action is for you to take. Whereas values can also be used as a tool to help guide you in your decision-making when you don't know what action to take.
I like that. I like that a lot. The mirror for our children? Should we be reflecting that back and then naming that? Like, are these all together? So we're repeating them, embodying them, and applying them, but when we embody them, we repeat them. When we apply them, we're naming it. We're making sure to do all of these things
That's right.
together. Okay.
Great. And then the L stands for literal, which I think is really the linchpin here, using kid-friendly everyday phrases instead of only abstract words, and also using stories to convey values. So I think we are totally guilty of using abstract words and not necessarily using story or phrases as we look to explain them to our kids. And that's what I hope the experiment will be about. But not to get ahead of ourselves. So I think that I wanted to just double click on this idea of sharing through story because I learned a new concept this week, which makes a lot of sense, but it's actually called narrative transportation. And so it's the concept that states that kids and adults are more emotionally moved and persuaded by stories than by facts or rules. And once I learned about that, I asked ChatGPT to write a short story, a fable, if you will, on how to be a noble Neufeld because you and I were leaving for 4 days. And so it did. It came up with a really cute short story about a koala, which is an animal that all three of our kids really love, and explained how to be conscientious and kind even when no one is watching, aka mommy and daddy are not there. And we read it a couple nights before bed, before we left.
I think almost to the chagrin of our kids' caretakers. We won't name any specifics, but we got a status report about a violation of one of those values where Hunter called somebody out. And
I think it's intergenerational conflict, right? So that happens. Okay, so to recap, the most important thing about values is to make sure that they are real, repeated, embodied, applied, and literal.
Cool.
Okay, but before we get into the experiment, anything that comes to mind when we talk about values that you'd like to share?
Well, I think that not having them growing up or not having them named, I can now reflect back, it was far from ideal. Not just because they're a great guiding principle, but because they imply some kind of ownership and belonging, right? I think values, I think about the most extreme, like Bridgewater, right? Where this either works for you or this doesn't, this culture of repeated grading of your peers and colleagues and what do they call it?
Radical
Radical
transparency.
transparency, right? And that works for you or it doesn't. But if it works for you, you align with that culture and you are a Bridgewater employee, not just an employee, but part of that cult almost in a good way.
I think it breeds psychological safety, which is what Google has found when it comes to teams is really the true foundation and underpinning is to feel safe to share your ideas and make mistakes in front of others.
Yeah. And one thing that really threw me for a loop when there was a lot of internal family conflict is how I thought I was on a team with everybody that I was related to. And because of some internal family issues, there was a lot of division between that team. And it struck me that the one thing that I was hanging on to was my last name and having that name shared with other people and thought that that was the sense of belonging. And when people didn't want to associate with our family from other Neufelds, I was totally jarred. And I think that not having the glue of named, stated, repeated family values that were core to my parents, my brother and I, that was definitely absent in hindsight. And I think I would have handled that time much better had I felt like part of an organization there as opposed to just, a surname. If that makes sense.
Absolutely, it does.
So the contrast with our kids is I love how enthusiastic they are about the family cheer. They might not know what all of those words are, and that's some of the work to be done, like what they actually mean, but that they show up in the world with that belonging, with that glue. Whenever we go out, whenever we're heading out on a Saturday adventure, we start the day with that in the car ride because it bonds us. And I just see it. I just see them. I see their eyes light up to know that this is the family unit that they
Mhm.
belong to. This is their Bridgewater.
That's right. I agree. I mean, I feel that way too. It's a little tingly feeling of cohesion, of belonging.
It is. It's a cool club.
It's a cool
I'm
club.
really happy to be in
Yeah.
it and to be sharing with others what we're learning along the way.
One of our friends this week suggested a question for conversations like this. When have you strayed from your values and what happened because of that?
That's a really good question. I think that in business, trying to do something that is not natural to the organization's values typically leads to a ton of wasted time and just burnout. And that's the thing that shows up that I'm willing to share today. But I have lots of personal anecdotes where I strayed from values that were core to me, seeking safety, seeking other things in times of extreme uncertainty, and took me a few years to walk those back. How about you?
I'm not a big strayer, as you know.
I know.
I'm a pretty disciplined person. That said, postpartum, especially with Maverick, after our third child, I would say not always being the mom that I want to be. And I don't mean, not spending enough one on one time with the other children. I mean, rage,
Yeah.
not taking care of myself and letting it come out on others. I think that's probably why I came up with the Neufeld cheer when I did. It's when I started to re-ravel. Is that a word? Kind of the unraveling, if you will, postpartum, and then starting to seek more cohesion for our family after he started sleeping, after I started sleeping. But there was a period of time there, as you know, for about 6 months where I was doing the Navy SEAL training of sleep, as one of my friends called it, up every 30 to 60 minutes. And I definitely feel like some of the behaviors, some of the actions that I took, particularly as a mom, um, during that time, were not living within my integrity and were not how I want to show up. So, but having some space and having some sleep, I can honestly say that I forgive myself for that. And I think our kids do too. But as far as what happened because of it, I think it helped me to recenter and repurpose and come up with what we did, which is the family cheer. And that's where we are today. And we certainly have a lot more to do as far as embodying them and applying them, etc. But at least it's a start.
It's a pretty good recall. It brought up, as you were saying that, a value that I unconsciously or subconsciously have developed and probably passed on to you and everybody, that we are the customer when it comes to interacting with professionals, whether they are experts or not. We are the customer, and the customer deserves a voice. The time that I strayed from that value with your second pregnancy with
Mm,
Jade, when I really wanted to fight the doctor on their recommendation to induce. And we were just exhausted from battling with them
mm-hmm.
against our better judgment. It all worked out okay, but it was a lot of unnecessary trauma, and I would say mentally, and a lot of scarring as a result of not fighting the resistance there.
Mm-hmm. The stakes were high at that time. And that's another reason why I feel like it's so important to talk about family values now because the stakes are low for the most part with our kids, right?
Hmm.
It's low stakes, safe to fail opportunities for them. But as they get older, being able to have these values as a decision-making tool and have the time under tension, as you say, by putting in the reps now at an early age and watching us do so and not just model them, but name them as we're modeling them, I hope will give them a lot of confidence and a lot of backbone as they grow.
Yeah. I wonder what their scars are going to be from
Oh my gosh.
these experiences.
Different ones than we
Very
have.
different from ours.
That's all we can ask, right?
That's right.
Okay. So, shall we get into the experiments section?
We shall.
Okay. Developmentally appropriate execution. Our kids are 3, 5, and 7. I do not expect them to be writing book reports on what it means to be luminous.
Right. And so to be clear, the experiment section is where we design the experiment that we're going to run up against the episode's learnings and report back.
Yeah. What minimum viable product that we think will move the needle can we commit to today?
Yes. And we encourage you all to try these experiments as well and share stories with us.
Yeah. Try ours or try whatever comes up for you.
Yeah.
Would love to hear how you're putting this in practice.
And at some point, we'll have to make a way of easily sharing those with us. Right now, you can
Comment in the episode.
comment in the episode. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So I wrote here on my notes, we don't have to do it all today, right? We already have a cheer. Let's pick what? 1 value, 3 values? What do you think, Greg, to work on over the next couple of months?
Well, we've got 7, right? So if we want to knock out 7 in the next 12, we could do 2 every 3 months.
Okay. Let's do that then.
Yeah.
Let's do 2 every 3 months. Okay.
Great.
Sounds good. The other thing I'd like to just put out there to be thinking about during this experiment time is there are some gaps. We only have 7 letters, right, in Neufeld, and I think that they show some range. But 2 come up for me, and I would ask you to explore the same. What do you think is missing for you? But being of service and spirituality are 2 values that I think are really important to me, to you, to our family that aren't necessarily accounted for in the family cheer.
Yeah. I think we can make that work as the Neufelds.
Right on, Greg, right on.
But yeah, I agree.
Okay. And then, I mentioned the ChatGPT story that we did the other day on being noble. I think we should do some more of those. Maybe come up with like poems or there's different types of story that I think will be important.
Yeah. Let's let the kids suggest some inputs.
Yeah, I bet you they could even give us some ideas like a value and an animal
Yeah,
and a
do a little Mad
form
Libs.
factor.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that could be fun, something to do. When can we do this, Greg?
Some other experiment will overlap with a conversation that allows this experiment to breathe life.
Okay. I also think some of the weekday mornings we have a little bit of time to come up with a story.
For sure.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about this gotcha jar? The idea of having a space where we can catch other folks doing a value in action and put it in there. I was thinking we don't really do rewards very often, but I was thinking we could have some type of family benefit if we get like 10 in the gotcha jar.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. Like watch a movie. Something crazy.
Something crazy.
I've been wanting to watch The Big Green.
Great movie.
Okay, so we've talked about some things. So what are we committing to?
We're committing to running an experiment and reporting back. I don't think that we're committing to what exactly that experiment's going to be right here.
Well, I think we're committing to picking 2 values.
Yep.
And sticking with them for 3 months.
3 months.
And reporting back on how we allow those values to permeate our day-to-day.
Yeah.
So the form factor for values can be so many different things, right? It can be words, it can be a cheer, it can be a series of sentences, it can be a manifesto. What matters is how you explore them as a family.
That's right. And that you explore them as a family.
Yeah. Cool.
Cool.
And if you have any feedback on how you are living your values, would love to hear them.
That's right.
All right. Love you, Goosey.
Love you, Goosey.